From a highly secure network of top secret locations across South Texas, this is the Spurs Insider, Dog Days of Summer Edition. I'm your host, Mike Finger, joined as always by Express News Spurs beat writers Tom Orsborn and Jeff McDonald. The roster is pretty much in place. The local Cagers have done pretty much what they expected to do this offseason. We're going to look at the roster that Brian Wright has assembled over the next 30 minutes or so. We're going to talk about all kinds of midsummer topics, whatever those topics might be. I'm sure the listeners are riveted, but I'm going to start with Jeff McDonald. Looking back, I think there's possibly one open roster spot left, maybe a couple of two-ways, but the bulk of what the Spurs plan to do has been done. Did they do it the right way? How would you kind of evaluate the roster that the Spurs have assembled this offseason, Jeff?
I think, as we've talked about before, like they've improved in at least improved vastly, at least one of the areas that they went into the offseason, needing to improve. And that's with, the big man depth, the front court depth, guys taller than 6'8" to play with and behind Victor and in Luke Cornett and Kelly Olynyk. The Spurs did address that need. And I think, as we've done on previous podcasts, we can quibble with whether they've done enough to address the perimeter shooting need. They did kind of, make some moves around the margins that might help a little bit with the David Jones-Garcia two-way and the Lindy Waters III contract. But yeah, they didn't go out and sign, Steve Kerr or anybody like that. So we can quibble with that. But overall, I think they've made strides in filling holes and being an even more competitive team next season than they were last season, which was a pretty good improvement over the season before that. And of course, all this hinges on the health of a couple of very important players. But other than that, I think they've moved the needle a little bit.
Tom Orsborn, after a week in Vegas with the Summer League team and a well-deserved respite in Southern California away from the Spurs land, do you have anything to add to what Jeff mentioned in terms of the Spurs offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I said it, I think the last time we met, that, it's going to be fun to see what Mitch Johnson does with these rotations, with the pieces that have been assembled. And, everyone is focusing on the guards, but the big men, that's interesting too. What he's going to do with Cornett and Olynyk, how much he plays them with one of them with Wemby, what he does with maybe a big Oklahoma City type lineup. And yeah, as far as, the recent signings, Waters, they, a staffer told me in Vegas that they want to assemble a team that has a veteran-laden bottom of the bench, something they haven't had in a while. So, they've kind of fulfilled that goal. So, yeah, I think it's, as I said before, I think it's been a very good offseason for them.
That's an interesting goal, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think it fits the history of when the Spurs were good. You get some kind. Look, you're not going to play 15 guys in a night. You can sign 15 players to full contracts. You can sign 3 guys to two-ways. You're not going to play all those guys. You're generally not going to play more than 10. And even when you account for injuries and guys getting more playing time, guys getting less playing time, you're not going to play more than 12 over the course of a random few weeks or over the course of a random month. So what are you going to get out of those guys who aren't playing? Are those guys, one train of thought is those are the really young guys who aren't ready yet, who you are developing, who you are sending up and down from the G League team, who are hopefully making progress in the shoot around 5-on-5 games that Jeff and Tom and I like to watch in visiting arenas where the guys who never play each other and staffers and ball boys. or are you getting veteran know-how from those type of guys? And I think that's when you're making the step that the Spurs hope to make this year, you hope to get some kind of again, veteran know-how, some experience, some leadership from those spots. And that's another way to use those spots. And I think when you consider that like Jordan McLaughlin's probably not going to play a whole lot, Lindy Waters maybe could play some, but is not going to be plugged into the rotation on night one. If those type of guys can give you a little bit of just veteranness, as opposed to who are the alternatives? Malachi Branham and Blake Wesley, who have been around, but we're not young anymore, and we're not guys who you thought are going to be part of the thing in the future. It makes a whole lot more sense to fill out that part of the bench with Jordan McLaughlin and Lindy Waters, and even like Kelly Olynyk, who might not play every night. I think he's going to play a lot, but those type of guys, as opposed to those tweener types in Blake Wesley and Malachi Branham.
The development era is over, where they have those guys at the end of the bench that they're trying to develop and build up. That era is kind of over for now.
If you want a veteran laden bottom of the bench, I got a hot take for everybody for that last 15th roster spot. Let's bring back Patty Mills.
Man, he's in Hawaii. Why the heck would he come back here?
That's probably the issue, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's the type of guy. I do think just roster construction wise, and if you lay out like a 3-tier depth chart, I think that last spot probably should go to a biggish type person. I think they might need one more power forward type as opposed to another. They're covered in the little guy department.
Bring back the breakout star of Happy Gilmore 2, Boban Marjanovic.
Sure. Who would be and I hate to harp on
I'm being
negative stuff and heartbreaking stuff, but the perfect guy for that last spot would be Sandro, who found a better gig in Toronto. But that's exactly the type of person they need for that 15th spot.
Why'd you got to bring us down?
Go ahead.
Why'd you got to bring us down that way?
I'm sorry.
Such a wet blanket.
I'm sorry. There's a couple of two-way spots available. I was looking at this, and this is not going to win us the podcast award of the year, whatever the podcast Emmys are, which I know we were in contention for.
Thanks.
Potties?
It's not going to, it's the potties.
I think they call it potties.
It's not going to make us go viral when you're talking about two-way contracts. But I had mentioned on a previous podcast about how it had been a while since the Spurs had hit two-way pay dirt. And I went down a two-way contract wormhole, as it were. And you fellas are on top of it. You cover the league, you cover the team year round. You're probably aware that the idea of a two-way contract, the first two-way contracts were signed in the summer of 2017. It's been 8 years in the two-way contract era. At first, there weren't 3 available. Now there are 3 for every team to sign. Some of the greatest two-way contract players the league has ever produced include the likes of Austin Reeves, of Duncan Robinson, Naz Reid, Lou Dort. Alex Caruso was on a two-way contract at one point. Derek Jones on that. Max Strus. There's been some guys who have become productive NBA players on two-way contracts. Do you know the first two-way contract that the Spurs ever signed? There's no way you know this. So I'm not even going to ask you. But that person's name is Matt Costello. Do you fellows remember Matt Costello?
I remember Abbott.
Yeah, Lou's great grandson.
But can you even, you both were covering the team at the time. We all were covering the team in 2017.
I remember the name, yes.
But you don't remember much about his style of play or anything like that?
If he showed up at my front door right now to, change my locks, I wouldn't recognize him. No.
This was a long way of getting to the second two-way contract that the Spurs ever signed, which was also in 2017. And this person you probably do remember. And you, Jeff, for a brief moment, thought that he might have seen this person in a restaurant in Los Angeles several years later during a Super Bowl. Jeff, do you know who I'm talking
Are you
to? About here?
are you talking about the great Darren Hillyard?
Darren Hillyard, who we did not see.
Should we just tell that story?
Well, we need to have the great Bill Schoening on the podcast.
We will, but now that we beat around the bush, we might as well just tell it. Everyone's going to be confused.
Super Bowl, what year? Several years ago. Several years ago. The Spurs were playing. You can look it up. The Spurs were playing in the City of Angels the night after the Super Bowl and maybe the night before the Super Bowl. So we had a night off, and the Spurs contingent decided to watch the big game at a local eatery.
It was the Yard House. It was the Yard House. We didn't pick it right. It was just right across the street from the hotel.
Former, longtime, legendary voice of the Spurs, Bill Schoening, sitting next to me, and he looked across the way and he said, "That guy over there in that booth, right across from us, that is Darren Hillyard." And I said, that does kind of look like Darren Hillyard. And Bill got up and walked over, and he shook the guy's hand, sat down next to him, sat and talked to him for 15, 20 minutes. They were long lost friends. The group of us looked and said, "That must be Darren Hillyard." Bill's talking to Darren Hillyard. Bill came back after 15 minutes and said, "Nope, that wasn't him."
And the kicker of the story is when the artist who was not known as Darren Hillyard got up to leave, he was like 5'10".
Yeah, he was not anything close to Darren Hillyard. But Bill could talk to anybody. And Bill regaled him with stories about the Spurs. Anyway, this was a long way of getting to the fact that the Spurs have had a few guys on two-way contracts who have become productive NBA players. You had the great KBD, Keita Bates-Diop, was a two-way player for a while. Drew Eubanks, two-way player for a couple years. Dom Barlow,
trying to make his way in Philly now.
Dom Barlow, yeah. The one that I'd forgotten, who is, I think, the Spurs' best two-way player, and the one that's still around. That's the big giveaway here. He's still around.
I was going to wonder if you're going to get to him, because I had a listener reach out to me and tell us we were idiots for forgetting this guy.
Yeah, and that person is
Julian Champagnie.
Julian Champagnie started on a two-way. Here's the thing. It wasn't for a full year. He was signed as a two-way at the end of a season, and then immediately.
It wasn't even that. This is why we forgot him. The Spurs didn't technically sign him to his two-way deal. The 76ers did and waived them, and the Spurs just picked him up off waivers, which means they assumed his two-way contract.
There you go.
So the press release that went out didn't say Spurs signed Julian Champagnie to a two-way contract, even though that's sort of what happened. And that's why it fell through the cracks for me. Is I thought of him as a guy the Spurs claimed off waivers, but I didn't do the extra step in my head going, yes, they claimed him on a two-way contract. So
he was a two-way player. That was towards the end of a season. I believe it was the end of the 22-23 season. And then that summer of 23, he was signed to a full deal, and that's worked out pretty well. And so we weren't trying to. This was a long roundabout way of atoning for our Julian Champagnie omission. But we have the utmost respect for Julian Champagnie, who I think is going to be an important part of the Spurs roster this season. I think in one sense, he's holding down a spot that they might hope that young Carter Bryant assumes eventually. But in the meantime, he's a like for $3 million. He's a really good guy to have on your bench, and 3-and-D type of guy, the guy who Spurs might re-sign in the future. Like that's a true two-way success story for the Spurs. So they have had some guys break out from there. Now, looking forward at what they have this year, they did sign a summer sensation, David Jones-Garcia, one of those two-way spots, and I think that's a good spot for him. He was not. As we said on the last podcast, I didn't think he was a guy who was beating down the door to get one of the 15 full contracts, but to keep that guy around on a two-way, I think that's exactly how you use your two-ways.
I'm glad you brought up David Jones-Garcia. I'll ask this question even though I know the answer. You guys don't happen to read the comments under our podcast that people leave?
Absolutely. Do we even have those?
There's plenty. I read them because I just feel like if people take the time,
On what form? What
on all of
service?
them, but usually YouTube would be the most commented.
Is that right?
But anyway, people hated our David Jones Garcia take last time.
I'm sure they did.
Like hated it. Like hated it.
Where we said that they should sign he'd be fine for a two-way, but not for a full, and they ended up signing him to a two-way.
Some people were nice about it. Love the pod guys, but don't understand your DJG shade. Other people though, like there was one fellow that thinks we're protecting Spurs management because they don't want a guy from the Mexico City G League team to come in and upstage all the other summer league guys, and that's why they wouldn't sign him to a full deal. But I think we proved ourselves right on that. Like what we said, sign him to a two-way if you can get him for that. I wouldn't go much more than that. That's what they got him for. So that was great. It did have
That seems pretty non-controversial.
Yeah, well, they hated our take. They thought
he was worthy of a full contract. Any 30 teams could have signed him to a full contract.
They thought we were crapping all over him. Just discounting his entire summer shine. By the way, summer league is fake. Summer league's fake, everybody.
We're talking about practice.
But my favorite comment on this thread was the guy says, the guy who uses the word cagers must have been around when basketball was invented.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You're making an impression out there in podcast land. Maybe we'll win you a potty.
I think that's all AI, isn't it?
No, Allen Iverson is the one that's talking about practice.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I am sort of shocked that anyone thought we were bashing David Jones-Garcia, who I think earned a two-way contract and got a two-way contract. That's exactly how two-way contracts should be used.
There are some people that say things like "good take," "way to be rational," but I'm not going to read those. Those aren't funny.
Anyway, yeah, good for David Jones-Garcia. Perfect spot for him. We'll see like the chances of him becoming a regular member of an NBA rotation. Probably not that high because there's just the history of two-way contracts. You don't see a lot of those. The hit rate isn't through the roof, but he has a chance. And he's one of the best basketball players in the world. When you think about how many jobs there are in the NBA, and to get one of those three-way spots, the three two-way spots that each team has, one of the absolute best at what he does in the world. The top 1% of the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. Well done, David Jones-Garcia.
I have not looked this stat up. I'm just going to assume it's true, but I bet he led all players playing in Mexico in scoring last year.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So he's definitely the best player in Mexico.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't want to make any assumptions about Mexico. There's great players in Mexico.
Edward Nahara.
There's a good chance he was, and now he has a chance to show his wares in the NBA G League and possibly in the NBA. He can play as many as 50 games with the big team. I don't expect that to happen, but good for him.
Yeah, he's gonna have to beat out a lot of guys that are need minutes before he can get his shot.
And I'm not sure it's about beating out. It's just like it's going to take injuries because you're not going to move him ahead of a lot of the guys who are ahead of him. That's just the way it works. But he can take advantage if he gets an opportunity. And congrats. Do not want to make it sound like we are down on David Jones-Garcia.
Of course not. Perfect two-way guy.
Realistic. Perfect two-way guy. The other contractual situation this summer involves possible extensions. Like the roster's pretty much set, but there are extensions that the Spurs might be able to give out. And the most noteworthy of those is that of DeAaron Fox, who I believe on August 3rd is eligible to sign a 4-year extension. He signed for 1 more year. He's under contract for this season. They can add 4 years to that and pay him over $220 million. and wrap him up through the 2031 season if they so choose to do so. And if De'Aaron Fox chooses to sign that deal, I am of the thought process that maybe that is not as automatic as it might have been when the Spurs traded for De'Aaron Fox 6 months ago. I still think it might happen. But I think we alluded to this on the last podcast. Things have changed since they made that deal. I think in some ways, the Spurs landing the number 2 pick in the lottery and landing Dylan Harper has made people forget about what a big deal it was for them to get De'Aaron Fox. It has made people almost too down on De'Aaron Fox. Because when you think about how we were talking about him that first week after he was on the roster, and he hit the game winner against, was it Charlotte, Tom, Atlanta?
Yeah.
There were those 2 games. Atlanta, he hit the game winner. You're thinking this is just exactly how they drew it up. And you can imagine De'Aaron Fox and Victor Wembanyama being pick and roll partners into the next decade. They got him for a steal. The Spurs gave up no player that was part of their future. None of their more attractive draft picks. Really got him for nothing. And you still look at it, and the Spurs got a really, really good player for almost nothing. And the difference is, does he make sense long term with Dylan Harper and with Stephon Castle and with, on down the line, Carter Bryant, what have you? Or is this a situation, Jeff, where you think there might be a middle ground to be found where an extension is signed for less than 4 years in the max?
I can't really tell you numbers or years, but I will be surprised if they don't, if De'Aaron Fox and the Spurs do not agree on something.
Yeah.
I would be a fool's errand for me to sit here and try to tell you numbers and, years and dollars. I'm not Bobby Marks, but I would be shocked if they don't come to an agreement on something.
And here, Tom, is the argument for it, and the argument against just throwing him out with the bathwater because they got Dylan Harper. Again, he is an asset. He is a guy who fits. He's a guy who they targeted not just 6 months ago, but the Spurs have had him in mind for a long time as somebody who fits their program. He wants to be here. And when you think about it, like, the reason they got him for nothing is because De'Aaron Fox sort of forced that. Like, he made it clear to Sacramento that he didn't want to be anywhere else, and that this was his preferred destination. And when a player like that, an all-star caliber player, kind of puts himself out there and says, I want to be in San Antonio and I want to be part of what you're building, and shows that kind of faith in an organization that has not won a lot in recent years. Like, I think, I'm not sure I want to use the phrase you owe him something, but maybe you do. Like you don't just put that person on the trade market because you get Dylan Harper. You don't just flip him to another place where he doesn't want to be. Like, you sort of do owe him the chance to be a part of this long term. And I think if the Spurs were this, there's no way they're going to do this because it's not how they operate. But if they were to say, oh, we got Dylan Harper now, and we're going to dump you to Charlotte or Memphis, or, just name your team, Toronto, like, what would that do for the Spurs dealing with players in the future, with De'Aaron Fox's agent, with whoever? Like, that's just not a smart way to go about business. And so I fully expect, like Jeff said, for an extension to be reached, maybe the full extension. But I mean, in worst case scenario, if you do the max extension, you have a guy who I think is going to be desirable by other teams for a good while. And if it doesn't work out where you think that Dylan Harper and De'Aaron Fox can coexist for 4 or 5 years into the future, you're going to have options. You're going to have flexibility. And so I know I was going to get to Tom here eventually, but that's kind of my view of that situation.
Yeah, no, I agree. It would send a terrible message, after the desire that he's shown to be here, and it just makes no sense. you've got such a small sample size
Yeah.
of him, and it was a good sample size. It just makes no sense to me to discard him. If anything, Dylan Harper's he's the unknown quantity. We know what DeAaron Fox is. It just doesn't make sense.
And G's
go ahead.
G's a whiz. He's a good basketball player too. On top of all that, there's all these like business reasons and making people happy. And he's also a good basketball player that's going to help you win games. He's one of the best scoring guards on the planet. Is he an MVP candidate? Of course not. Is he an all-star candidate? Maybe. He's been to the all-star game before. He's gotten 23 points a game every, the last 5 years in a row. We just watched two teams in the finals that bunch of ball handlers, bunch of creators, bunch of secondary, you can't have too many of those guys. So when you have one that wants to play for you, one of the best in the world that wants to play for you, and you have a chance to lock him up, I think you do it. Now you can the genesis of this question is, for what and how long, and those are all questions you can, bat around. But at the end of the day, you don't just cast him aside because you drafted a rookie who's going to be a great rookie. I think I have high hopes for Dylan Harper as well down the line, but I don't see there's any. Maybe I'm stupid, but I don't see any reason all these guys can't coexist and win a ton of basketball games together.
The hard part of podcasting in this era is it's just you're having a take on one side or the other, and there's not room for no one pays attention to the middle ground. But to devil's advocate against what y'all are saying, or not necessarily against, but just to temper what you guys are saying. The argument that De'Aaron Fox should not be someone that you wrap up for the max until 2031 is there's going to come a point when this roster gets more and more expensive, and maybe the most efficient use of all your financial resources isn't to be paying a bunch of guards, a bunch of point guard types in Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox, and Dylan Harper, all that money to play with Victor Wembanyama when you could use that money on something else. But I think that is a 4 or 5 years from now problem, as opposed to and you should always be planning for the future. Yes. There's always some devil's advocate to everything that we say here. But I think that's what people see is down the line is the best way to build a championship team, to have 3 guys who all have point guard qualities. The cool thing about it is all 3 of those guys have point guard qualities, but they're really different players. Stephon Castle's a guy who's going to guard the heck out of wing guys. You have no issues imagining him guarding small forward types, shooting guard types. De'Aaron Fox is more of the quick playmaker type, the pick and roll type. Dylan Harper, you can imagine him playing between those 2 guys. The key is you want one of them to be able to make 3-pointers at a higher rate than they do now, which I think will be possible with both Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle. But you could see a scenario where all 3 of those guys coexist and fit into a role and really become an elite backcourt for the Spurs. And I think you have to give that a chance to work itself out. And if for some reason in a couple of years you realize you can move on, like Dylan Harper has become a clear all-star in the making. Stephon Castle has added a dimension to his game, and you can play him on the wing. And you can start to think, okay, maybe we can move on from De'Aaron Fox. But for all the reasons we talked about here, I think that it makes a lot of sense to keep De'Aaron Fox happy and around. And I think he's really important for what the Spurs hope to do in the next couple of years in terms of making the playoffs. The Spurs, when the Spurs make the playoffs for the first time, they will have basically nobody who has been there before. Harrison Barnes, who am I forgetting? Luke Cornett. Those are role player type guys. You want one of the guys with the ball in his hands to have a little experience. And De'Aaron Fox hasn't played in a lot of playoffs, but he's got a little more veteran savvy than some of those younger guys. And I think that will be a big help when the Spurs get into those series.
Yeah.
And then 4 years from now, when you're ready to compete, you re-sign Chris Paul at 44 to be your veteran point guard. Oh, we talked about it. He's with the Clippers now. We brought that up.
I think we all expected him to go there. I'm not sure when it became official, but like, happy for him. He'll fit in great.
I saw he gave the Spurs some props in his little welcome press conference there, saying he probably wouldn't be in the league if the Spurs hadn't thrown him a lifeline last year. So good for everybody.
Spurs really enjoyed him. I think he really enjoyed the Spurs. That was cool. I think it's cool that Victor Wembanyama and Stephon Castle's gonna be a guy who appreciates and remembers Chris Paul for a long time. They were side by side in the locker room.
Yeah.
Chris loves Stephon Castle. Stephon Castle loved Chris Paul. And even if Stephon Castle's future in this league is not as a point guard, like, he learned a lot of stuff from that guy and got a lot of confidence and encouragement and just a lot out of that relationship that I think will pay off for the Spurs for a long time. I realized there were fans out there, the listeners of the podcast, that didn't love the Chris Paul experience, like every minute of it, and felt like he wasn't going to be here forever. So what was the point? But I think when the Spurs win a playoff series down the line, there will be at least a piece of it that dates back, that traces back to stuff that they got from Chris. And
just knowing what I've seen from him in the last year and talking to the other guys about him, I don't think the mentorship with these guys is over. Like, I think Stephon Castle, for better or worse, can expect tons of phone calls from Chris Paul this year to come. Because Chris, as we know, watches everything, every game. And if he sees something that Steph needs to know, he'll have no problems calling him up, texting him up. And, what you said is correct. Like, he left an imprint on this team that you couldn't get otherwise. And it's going to be an important small piece when these guys develop into what the Spurs hope that they will develop into.
Be funny this year if Steph Castle's all over Dylan Harper and Carter Bryant about rookie chores. Where's my towel? Where's my donuts?
Now, I think that part of it, that would be hilarious, but I think that part of it is just going to fade away. Because kids these days just sound like the guy who was around when basketball was invented.
That was in the Cager days, yeah.
Back in the cage, like the whole, and this might be for good, but the whole hazing thing, it's not even hazing. It's more just the
jackass
idea that rookies need to pay their dues. That whole mentality just doesn't exist as much anymore. And I don't think Stephon, it's very funny that Tom breaks that up, but I can't imagine Stephon passing that down. He thought it was corny and out of date when he was expected to have towels and stuff.
But it was kind of Sandro that was the ringleader of the payback there.
That's true.
Not exactly an old man.
And
there are old
Fox,
souls among the youngsters.
Yeah, DeAaron Fox is a big believer in that hierarchy. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that'll continue to be passed down. But I just don't. I think that eventually is going to go away. Maybe I'll be wrong.
Probably.
But
times are changing.
Times are changing
For the better.
Sometimes for the better.
Sometimes, yes. Yes.
Well,
the newspaper you've been reading.
All right.
That sigh, that heavy sigh from Tom Orsborn means that we're
It's our
reaching
cue to go.
our conclusion on the Spurs Insider. We will meet again at some point in August. Things are slowing down, free agency wise, transaction wise, just basketball wise in August. But we will meet again to check in. Hope everybody has some fun summer times out there. Enjoy, go touch grass, get away from the podcast world for a little bit, and we'll be around to see you again in a few weeks. Until then, take care of each other and keep it real.